video endoscope that is being shipped from California right now. But anyway, those three things are what's required. And if you don't have those three things, you're not doing a good exam. If you're not doing a good exam, it means you don't even know what you're looking for, so it means you don't know what you're doing. So that's what I tell, like I said, when I have clients move away, you know, how will I know if I know what they're doing? Well, they at least need to have those three things, because if you don't have those three things, you aren't even looking.
Do you mind if I video this?
I don't mind if Sam does.
Oh, no, it's totally fine.
Okay, since I already started, thanks.
Live on Facebook, by the way?
No, not yet. That's just if he screws up.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Loki will be 14 this year.
So the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at his incisors, and I'm looking at what's called the molar freeway space. So I'm putting his incisors in occlusion, and I'm looking through his cheeks to get an idea when, like I said, when his molars are in occlusion, his premolars and molars, there's a gap of about like that, which is pretty normal. They aren't supposed to touch when the incisors are touching, so that looks good. There's several different types of these full mouth speculums. This is just the style that I like, but there's a 3 or 4 other kind of basic designs that are used. Gotta get a little hay out of there. So the instruments I'm using besides my mirror are basically the same instruments that get used in your mouth, only modified to get way back in here. So I'm using a periodontal pick and also a periodontal depth gauge. So just like, you know, when you're at the dentist and they're poking your gums, they're doing the 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 3, 2. What they're doing is they're measuring periodontal pocket depth, and I do the same thing in here. Mirror. Like I said, it's all the same instrumentation, just modified to get way back in here. Loki is a good example of a horse that has no medical issues whatsoever in his mouth. He has an absolutely normal mouth. But knowing what Loki does for a living, we are going to do some work in here. Especially on the uppers. If anybody wants to look over my shoulder, you're more than welcome to. You can see on the upper teeth, on the outsides next to the gums, those sharp kind of pointed areas. That's what we're going to be floating.
Oh, I see.
Yep. And that's what I want to point out. That is normal anatomy. There is nothing abnormal about that.
Where?
You can especially see it on the upper teeth, on the outsides. Yeah. So that is normal anatomy. There's nothing medically wrong with that. So in one respect, he does not need to be floated. If he were, you know, some broodmare living his life, or, you know, he got rented out on Saturdays to walk straight on a trail for 30 minutes, no. But one thing I've run into, especially if you have a good rider and you're in a discipline where you're asking a lot of head carriage, you can see pretty obviously when you're asking for some of those motion, for some of those movements, you can run into some problems with avoidance, because you'll start getting pinching in those areas, between the gum and those areas. And that's why we're doing it for Loki. So what we have to make sure while we're doing that, though, is a common thing that I used to see it more commonly. I don't as much anymore. But actually, I'm going to do one side, and then I'll let you guys compare, okay?
So is aspirating those fine particles not a concern with horses?
No.
Because he's breathing through his nose?
Yep.
Okay.
Obligate nasal breather.
Oh.
The other thing you can see is that for as much time as I spend examining, I'm not spending much time grinding. Okay. If anybody wants to look, I did his passenger side. I have not done the driver's side yet.
Is that the technical term?
Yes, it is. Highly technical. So you can see where I was working, right?
Yes.
Yep.
If you notice, well, it's hard to see without the mirror, but on the outside surface of those upper teeth, there are ridges that run up and down like this that are called singular ridges. And those ridges are pretty critical for helping transfer food back into the back of the mouth, kind of like running a grain auger. A common error you'll see is usually what happens when these horses get overfloated is that those singular ridges are removed, basically by doing about double or triple what I just did. The other thing you'll notice if you look at these teeth is that I just worked on that outside surface a little bit. I didn't touch any of the chewing surface at all. The only time you would go onto the chewing surface if there is specific pathology there that you needed to address. There's another problem you'll run into with overfloating, especially on the upper teeth, and that's exposure of one of the pulp horns. And I can show you on the diagram here in a second why that can happen if you get too aggressive in here. It becomes real critical to know where the pulp horn is and where the secondary dentin is. There should never be blood with a standard procedure like this. If you draw blood in a horse like this, it's because you messed up. There's a few different cutting tools to use. I prefer diamond bits because they're a little less aggressive. And they're real tissue friendly as well. See, I'd almost have to try to cut soft tissue with those. You'll see people do this a different way too, as far as where they like the horse. You see how he's lifting his head up a little bit? That doesn't really bother me. My preference is to not have them very sedated because I work by myself. And I mostly want them to hold their head up. I just need them to sit still. I don't really need them sedated. Some people prefer them quite a bit more sedated like this because, usually because they have an assistant or a headstand or something. That's fine too. But my personal preference is to have the horse mostly awake. If I had to do something more extensive on him or painful, extract a tooth or something, I'd sedate him more than this, and then the same dental blocks that are done on us for painful dental work, taking into account different anatomy, but those same blocks apply to these horses. Can block, each quadrant as I need to. Anybody want a last look before I close his mouth? This is about as close as you're going to get to a normal horse mouth as you'll ever see. There is just absolutely boring in here. Which is good, yeah, exactly. But he's incredibly boring in there. There's honestly nothing to point out. But that's how it should look. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I just, so what do you do with like the older horses that may never have seen you,
Yep.
and they've got, really worn, high ridges and stuff? Are you just gonna try to match the top to the bottom, or what do you do?
Somewhat, yeah. It's a kind of a case by case. How impaired is the chewing function of the horse? How much can I realistically connect or correct? Again, go back to the foot analogy.